Okay, hello, welcome back. This is Assassin's Creed Syndicate. We are at the front of our train, looking out over early morning London. Very lovely. So, before I start this video, I'm going to let you know I have done similar videos in the past. Two of them specifically come to mind. One of them is straight up, it's free will versus predeterminism, and explores the relationship between assassins and Templars. Excuse me, ran out of breath there. And the other one is called Assassins Are Mormons. And it's kind of tongue-in-cheek video that compares certain philosophies of the assassins with certain philosophies of members of my religion. We're actually, Mormon is a nickname, it's called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And specifically, it compares the obsession, or not obsession, but the interest in genealogy and basically free will versus predeterminism. So, why I'm coming back to this is actually an interesting aspect of it that occurred to me a little bit earlier. It was, so I was watching a classic Doctor Who storyline titled The Mind of Evil. It's from 1972, I believe. It's the third Doctor storyline. It's actually a pretty good storyline. But it involves a machine known as the Keller machine and a process known as the Keller process. And what this machine and process does is it removes all the negative impulses from a person's brain and stores them. Basically, it stores all the negative impulses that are taken from somebody's brain. Now, this process is being used on convicts, specifically convicts who have violent crimes in their past. It's not specifically stated, probably because it was a kid's show in the 1970s, but it was implied that these people were murderers. It's for specifically murderers, and it's mentioned that this is a more humane way to deal with people than the death penalty, which had recently been outlawed in the UK at the time, or in England at the time, I believe. And the Doctor immediately opposes this idea, and he actually, I get the impression they don't really go into too many details with it, which is too bad, but also, you know, they want to get to the adventure so that the kids will really enjoy the show. But he seems to imply that this is actually a more barbaric punishment than, say, the death penalty would be. Which is, you know, for a fairly liberal society and a liberal show, that's actually a pretty interesting statement to make. Now, what it put me in mind of is another show, Babylon 5, and a specific episode from, it's either season 3 or season 4, where we discover that, you know, that the penalty for all violent crimes that they have and use in this futuristic society of Babylon 5 is to basically erase a person's memory, implant this idea of, you know, doing community work, and then release them back into the community with them, you know, being a part of the community and doing community work at this time. And this is implied to be a very good thing. It's the opposite reaction the Doctor has, basically. It's considered such a part of the culture, it's not even questioned. But it seems to be considered to be a very good thing. And of course, this put me in mind of the conflict between Assassins and Templars, which is why we are in Assassin's Creed, and riding the train for the fun of it. So the conflict, as I've stated before, between Assassins and Templars is very basic. It's assassins are for freedom, even if there are negative consequences such as crime. The Templars are in favor of control, even if that means removing freedom, meaning that nobody has any freedom, nobody can, you know, make the choice or decisions that they want. And it, excuse me, it is an interesting dilemma and dichotomy. It's free will versus predeterminism, basically. So I think the main question that's being raised, and what makes this kind of a different conversation, is one that I think pretty much anybody watching this should ask themselves is, if you had the ability to remove any sort of negative impulses from a human being, say, just something that would keep them from committing a crime like murder or rape or assault or robbery or anything like that, if you had the ability to remove that, would you do that? And we can all argue all the moralistic questions about that can be argued, and I brought up, do you have moral right to control what another person does, even if it's a benefit to society? And part of the argument that people make on that is, wait a second, don't we do that with prisons? If a person commits a crime, they go to prison. It is an interesting thing because, while we imprison them, that's a consequence of the action, basically. We don't remove their ability to take the action by putting a person in prison. We just say, hey, if you commit this crime, you'll go to prison. It's a natural consequence. This one this basically goes straight to the consequences, is you won't have the ability to think of this crime before a person commits a crime. So it no longer becomes cause and effect. It becomes this, basically, we are controlling every move you make, sort of thing. And Assassin's Creed that's always been kind of the focal point. I think pretty much every single Assassin's Creed explores this to a certain extent. The Templars want the pieces of Eden, specifically so that they can control the population. And they actually present the argument quite well in the Assassin's Creed movie, if you saw that. While there are certain issues and problems with the movie, it was fairly entertaining, I thought. But they did present it really well. It's like, what if you could stop all crime? Isn't that a wonderful, wonderful thing? And the interesting aspect about this, and this goes back to my religious beliefs. Like I said, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, one thing, I thought, actually, this is one of those things that I was raised in the religion, and I thought pretty much all Christian religions believed this, but apparently not. But we believe, one, in pre-existence, but we also believe that a certain event happened, that there was what might be termed a war in heaven in the pre-existence, a war not of fighting and violence, but of words and discussions. And it boiled down to, as God presented this plan. We believe everyone was there in the pre-existence, and this plan was presented to everyone. Oh, excuse me. And in this plan, the entire idea, the entire concept was basically our earthly lives. We would come here, we would be tried, we would be tested. We would, some of us would succeed, some of us would fail. But we would be tested. Now, Satan, Lucifer, came forward and said, wait a second, I've got a great idea. We'll do your plan. We'll come to Earth. Everybody will get a body. It'll be great. But we're going to remove free will. These people, we will just make sure everybody obeys the commandments. That way, everybody will come back. Nobody will be lost. Everyone will be saved. It's a great idea. And you know what? I deserve credit for thinking up such a great idea. So, let's give me some love here. Give me some credit for doing it. It's my idea. Let's do that. That's a much better idea. And then Christ came forward and said, I'm willing to take this responsibility on myself. I will follow your plan, and, the glory will be God's. And this escalated into the war as we refer to it. Now, it's referred to war. I'm not entirely sure what it means. Like I said, it appears to be just a war of words back and forth. The end result was that a third of everybody in the pre-existence was cast out and became devils, like Lucifer did. They were cast out of heaven, basically. And, we got to come to this earth and we got to have the free will. Now, why was Lucifer's plan so bad? A lot of people say, well, okay, free will sounds good, but when you see what people do with their free will, it seems really bad. So the reason why Lucifer's plan was so bad was because nobody would learn a thing. Nobody would be tested. Nobody would figure things out. There's an old saying that it's easy to be a diabetic if you're not standing in treacle and it's raining sugar. It's very easy for us to avoid temptations, to do the right thing. Well, let's remove temptations. It's very easy for us to do the right thing when there is no temptation. When we just stand there and nothing happens to us, it's very easy for us to do the right thing when we don't have a choice. We're never tested, and we never know what we are really like. We never know what kind of person we really are until we're tested. In the novel The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie, I highly recommend Agatha Christie. She's an incredible writer, and she knew human nature really well, and she knew really kind of this moral conflict of good versus evil. She knew that really, really well, and it comes out in her writing. But there's a story about a man that, Hercule Poirot, when describing the crime, he says, okay, picture a man. He's, a good, decent man, and in the normal course of things, if he's never tried, he's never tested, he has a weakness, but if he's never tried, nothing ever happens to him in the normal course of things, he'll die a good man. Let's say that at one point, a piece of information comes into his hands. He discovers a secret. And this is where his weakness shows out. He knows the secret, and he can use that secret to make a lot of money just by keeping the secret. He doesn't really have to do anything. He'll just get a lot of money for keeping the secret. And just telling the person who he's keeping the secret for that, hey, I'm keeping the secret, and give me some money for keeping this secret. And he will suddenly get all this money for keeping the secret. Now, as it goes on, the person who was being blackmailed was pushed too far and eventually killed themselves, leaving behind a note. And suddenly this man whose weakness is shown through, he's no longer the same man, and he panics. He faces exposure. So what does he do? He kills the person who knows his secret, knows that he's done this terrible thing. And that's actually a very apt description of what happens in the novel at the beginning. I highly recommend you read it. It's an incredible novel. But that's why we need to be tested, to see how good or how bad we really are. And it's not until we face temptation that we know for sure who we really are. We know what influences will follow. We'll know what we'll do when we're tested, when we're put into these situations. And we don't know that until we're tested. And it may not be... It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. But on the other hand, we will experience so much in life by being tested. There's an old saying that the most joyful... Well, I'm not even going to go into the old saying. I'm going to say from my personal experience, the most joyful, happiest people I've met are the people who have suffered the most. Because they know the alternative. They've seen how bad life can get for them, and they learn to just take such joy, such pleasure in the simple things in life. I've often been... I've had a few people, it's like, what is it about video games? Why do you get into them so much? And it's actually the same reason I really like movies, or books, or things like that. I can go into a new world, and I can experience just how incredible these worlds are. I mean, look around you. I'm in a station in London, a city I've never been to, in Victorian times, a time when I was not born. And it's a near constant source of amazement that I can you know, be in this place, have all these abilities I don't have in real life, and I can experience just how wonderful the world is, the fantastic, not realistic world of this game. I can experience it by turning on a machine and playing it, and it is a source of joy for me, as our books, as our movies. And as a child, you know, when I felt, you know, upset because of my parents' divorce, when I felt ostracized by my peers because I was a little strange or a little weird, when, you know, I am a religious person, but, you know, I didn't fit in with a lot of the people at church when I went to church as a child. I did not fit in. And, you know, the books gave me an escape and just made me look and love and appreciate just kind of the wonderful worlds that these books takes place in. And it transferred it to movies, to TV shows, and as the years went on, to video games. And at least for me, it's, you know, the stuff I've suffered, and which probably compared to what other people have suffered isn't that big, but, you know, it's personal to me, so it feels really strong to me what I've suffered. But, you know, it at least for me, makes me feel like I can appreciate the world of this video game much, much more. And I can only do that because I've experienced, you know, this suffering and this bad stuff that has happened to me. So many years ago, when I was I was serving a religious mission in Argentina, and there was a guy I knew, a fellow missionary. He was, you know, pretty decent guy, but he was so rebellious, but not just rebelling against the rules, because, you know, we were like between 19 and 21, so of course we're going to rebel against the rules. It's a teenage thing. But it wasn't just that. It was that he arrogantly, constantly believed he was right about every single rebelling. Every rebelling thing he did, he believed he was doing it for the greater good. He believed he was always right, even when people who were older, more experienced, who actually had taken on and were quite good with new responsibilities, would disagree with him. He would always believe he was right. And it was very arrogant, very full of himself. But what was interesting about him was that when I met him, when I talked to him, we were almost identical. I mean, we liked most of the same things we liked. You know, we could talk and get along. It was like, you know, looking in a mirror. And that really worried me because, you know, while I did and still do have a rebellious streak in me, his was so, you know, to the point where it was like, you know, kind of scary how out there he would get and how arrogant and full of himself he was in his rebellion. You know, it kind of scared me because that's not what I personally am like. And so I wondered about this, and I, you know, looked at him and I talked to him about it, and I came to discover that while we were so similar, we had one difference between the two of us, and that was I had suffered in my life. I've had gone through a lot of suffering just at a young age, with being unpopular, with, you know, parents going through divorce, going through all these things that were really hard for me at the time. And he had not. His life had been actually really, really easy. He had never faced any real challenges. He, you know, every time he was given something that, you know, would generally be considered difficult, he learned things very quickly and could do them really well. He never had to challenge himself, and he never, you know, had this opposition in his life. And, you know, I look at that, and you know, that was like the first time in my life I'd ever actually thanked God that I'd had a hard life, that I'd had all these challenges and the suffering in my life. And I didn't realize that, you know, I could have been something that I actually, as I am now, would not like about me had I not suffered. And, you know, that is kind of the whole point of having free will, having these challenges to our lives is how we define ourselves, how we become far, far better than we are. I mean, imagine if you were constantly on vacation. You were never challenged, never had that coming to you. Now, first off, imagine how boring it would be. And second off, imagine how you would never actually appreciate what you had. You know, you'd have all the food you'd want. You'd have, just, the most relaxed attitude all the time. You could do all these things, but why would you want to? And I discovered this in my life is, because I have weird work schedules at times. There are times when I have far more free time, and there are times when I have, hardly any. I'm working, 2 or 3 jobs at a time, and I'm doing a lot of work. That's just how my life has worked out. And so I discovered that when I'm doing all that work, when I'm doing all those jobs and all those works, I really enjoy, playing video games, reading a book. I do that because I can't do that all the time. It's actually quite rare for me to be able to sit down and read a book, or sit down and play a video game, or watch a movie. But, if I have several days in a row where I'm not doing anything, but, I can watch movies and play video games all I want, I get really bored of it really, really quickly. And that's really is kind of... And that's the nature. That's why free will is so important. It's important that we're constantly being challenged, that we're constantly... We constantly have these things that happen to us that are not pleasant, that are not fun. Because without them, how would we appreciate life? How would we really enjoy life? And, that's kind of a long way of going around and saying, yes, we need to have free will, even if the removal of the freedom would say reduce all crime, would not just reduce it, would completely obliterate all crime. There would be no crime anywhere in the world. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to reduce our abilities to choose, to think for ourselves, to choose and to do these things. It's such an important part of who we are, of who has made us. So anyway, that's a quick tour of London by train. I feel I've gone actually more in depth than I thought I would go into, but I hope you liked it. Let me know what you think. Let me know. Honestly, yeah. You don't have to let me know this, but if you want to, I would love to hear. If you had the ability to remove negative impulses from people and basically make them incapable of committing a crime because of this, would you do it? Anyway, like and subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Bye.